Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Wednesday, 23rd July 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Saudi Arabia is experiencing a surge in economic activity as it nears the culmination of its Vision 2030 plan. The Tadawul All-Share Index rose 1.3%, reflecting positive market sentiment. In June, Saudi Arabia became the leading purchaser of Russian fuel oil. Investment is vigorous, with Saudi startups securing $830 million in funding. The kingdom also led the MENA region with an $860 venture capital surge in the first half of 2025. Sumo Holding intends to launch a $1 billion real estate investment fund in Egypt. A Saudi business delegation's visit to Syria is expected to yield deals valued between $4 billion and $6 billion. Infrastructure projects are underway, including VA Tech Wabag's contract for a 300 MLD desalination plant in Yanbu. A new 5-star luxury train service with 5 scenic stops is scheduled to debut in 2026. Hakba, a Saudi fintech company, earned recognition from CNBC as one of the world's top fintechs in 2025. In a separate development, a Saudi prince, who had been in a coma for 2 decades, has died. China's relationship with the EU is facing challenges, largely due to a substantial trade imbalance, evidenced by a €400 billion deficit. This has led to a more subdued summit in Beijing. Domestically, China is actively tackling the demographic shift towards an aging population and the pressures on its social welfare programs. Direct financial support is being provided to elderly citizens through subsidy vouchers. Technological innovation remains a priority, with the development of AI-driven tools like Lavat. The country is also advancing its ambitious $167 billion Tibetan megadam project, which is anticipated to stimulate demand for hydropower equipment and materials, with potential benefits for companies such as Dongfang Electric and Tibet Qianlu. In an effort to boost trade, China plans to broaden tariff-free access to Hainan, with the goal of establishing an independent customs regime by December 18th, effectively turning the island into a free trade port. South Korea narrowly avoided a technical recession with a 0.6% GDP expansion in the second quarter, surpassing the projected 0.5% and reversing the previous quarter's 0.2% contraction. The exchange-traded fund ETF market in South Korea has exceeded 1,000 listings, reaching a record GT 222 trillion in assets. Rising apartment premiums are fueled by high demand for allocation rights. Seoul is assessing the potential of crypto assets to reshape the nation's economy, while also remaining cautious about the risks associated with crypto ETFs amid market uncertainties. Officials have been dispatched to Washington to closely examine the trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan, and MetLife's chief executive has highlighted the Korean market's strategic importance. Japan is currently focused on balancing new international trade deals with internal economic strategies. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba plans to stay in office to oversee the implementation of a fresh trade agreement with the United States. This agreement follows a general rally in global markets, with Japan's Nikkei 225 index notably increasing by 3.5% after the US and Japan finalized the tariff agreement. As part of this deal, the Japanese government will invest $550 billion, with the US set to receive 90% of the profits, according to the White House. Japan has also aligned itself with the European Union to support free trade and bolster economic security, addressing challenges presented by both the US and China. The US president's implementation of a 15% tariff on Japanese automobiles has caused concern among U.S. car manufacturers, who themselves face higher tariffs of 25% in Canada and Mexico. The allocation of the $550 Japanese investment will be determined by President Trump. Europe's leaders are pushing for more balanced trade with China, emphasizing free and fair practices. The China-EU summit aims to tackle policy differences and create equitable business conditions. Simultaneously, European stock markets rallied, thanks to optimism surrounding a possible US-EU trade deal and positive sentiment from the US-Japan agreement. Automakers particularly boosted European shares. Overall, the European markets showed mixed performance as investors weighed earnings reports and monitored trade discussions. The promise of fresh trade pacts, notably the US-Japan tariff accord, sparked a surge across Asian markets. Tokyo's Nikkei index led the advance. U.S. President Donald Trump's unveiling of these trade arrangements sought to ease pressure on certain Asian nations and enterprises, grappling with heightened import duties. Meanwhile, in the United States, the Tango Mall, situated in Flushing, Queens, is flourishing by catering to Asian American shoppers. The mall's unique attractions, including the Kokoro Cat Cafe, attract visitors such as Omo Diallo, 14, and Jana Firdaus, 15, contributing to its success against the backdrop of struggling malls nationwide. India's Executive Centre India aims to raise YAL 2,600 crore through an EPO earmarked for international growth and acquisitions of subsidiaries like Tech SGP and Tech Dubai. Danstein is optimistic about India's wealth management sector, highlighting Nuvama, 306 Yuan Wealth, and Anand Rathi Wealth. Tourist visas for Chinese nationals will soon be available again in India after a 5-year pause. India's stock market is riding the wave of global market optimism, influenced by the US-Japan trade agreement. The forthcoming FTA between India and the UK is expected to generate fresh commercial possibility. Russia is facing potential new U.S. sanctions, but President Trump's threat to act alone has stalled the Senate's effort. Bolstering its economy, the Chinese border town of Manjuli is facilitating increased trade between Russia and China. Despite agreeing to a prisoner swap with Ukraine, recent talks in Istanbul yielded little progress on broader issues. Turning to the United States, home sales saw a dip in June as prices reached unprecedented highs. Meanwhile, the easing of concerns over US tariffs has contributed to a fall in gold and silver prices within the domestic futures market. The United Kingdom's Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, is considering designating Apple and Google as having strategic market status. This reflects their considerable influence in the digital marketplace. Simultaneously, the UK secured a £4 80 billion trade agreement with India. This occurred during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit. Turning to Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has suggested a summit this summer. He proposes bringing together himself, Russian President Vladimir Putin, former US President Donald Trump, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to discuss paths towards peace. Zelensky mentioned that another round of peace negotiations with Putin's representatives is planned for Wednesday. Ukraine's leading military commander has also directly appealed to Donald Trump. The appeal seeks Trump's assistance in intensifying the conflict against Russia, pushing for the war to be taken to Russia. Further, the Ukrainian military has reported the loss of its first French Mirage fighter jet due to a crash connected to the ongoing conflict. Germany's shadow economy is expanding, fueled by high taxes and accessible state support. Vodafone is beginning to reduce its losses in the German market after previous struggles. The US-Japan trade accord is generating optimism among German car manufacturers, potentially influencing tariff discussions. City economist Katsuhiko Aiba believes the US-Japan deal could serve as a template for talks with major auto-exporting regions, like the EU and South Korea. Furthermore, Deutsche Bank anticipates that the top 10 German companies will see a combined upside of 20%. Australia is implementing stricter regulations for portable batteries on airlines after a fire incident on a Virgin Australia flight. Economically, Australian shares traded sideways, with technology and energy gains offset by declines in mining and coal. Australia plans to remove import barriers on US beef, which may be related to efforts to appease former President Trump. WHAM, a tech company, intends to reduce its staff size, citing AI-driven efficiency improvements. The potential impact of Trump's renewed interest in cryptocurrency on Bitcoin and Australian investors is under examination. South Africa's economy is showing signs of vigor. The South African stock index exceeded 100,000. This milestone aligns with a strengthening South African rand. The rand's rise is partly due to a slight increase in inflation. In business news, Natco Pharma bid Rs 2,000 crore for a 35.75% share in Adcock Ingram. The National Treasury declared an investor engagement close-out period. The opulent homes of the exiled Gupta family are now for sale, marking a new chapter. United States. Former President Trump is committed to combating woke AI and positioning the U.S. as a leading AI exporter. He recently signed 3 executive orders designed to accelerate AI development and implementation. Technology sector. Investor sentiment is positive toward Alphabet's AI investments, anticipating effective monetization and increased revenues. Singapore is seeing its chip toolmaker, SMT, thrive amidst the global surge in AI infrastructure demands. CEO Robin Ong has indicated that bookings for the first half of 2025 surpass initial expectations. Meanwhile, Singapore's inflation has dipped to a level not seen in over 4 years, a factor that will likely play a significant role in the monetary authority of Singapore's forthcoming policy adjustments. The Philippines is optimistic about its bonds outperforming other Asian debt, expecting central bank rate cuts to drive growth. The country is relatively insulated from US Treasury yield volatility. The Philippines also aims to lower US tariffs to 15% through negotiation. Canada. The S&P TX Composite Index in Canada saw a modest increase, closing 0.19% higher. TD Bank is partnering with Fiserv to improve its TD merchant solutions. However, one Canadian tech stock has experienced a significant decline, dropping 44% and is considered deeply undervalued. France. Political instability in France is creating uncertainty in European markets. Meanwhile, Canal has received a green light from antitrust regulators to acquire South African pay TV group MultiChoice, marking a major expansion into Africa. The Institut Français is also actively promoting the France-Brazil 2025 season, celebrating cultural exchange between the two nations. Brazil. Air travel in Brazil reached record levels, with 61.8 million passengers recorded in the first half of 2025. Conversely, smaller Brazilian coffee producers are concerned as the U.S. has imposed a 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee imports, potentially impacting their livelihoods. Thailand, Cambodia. A border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia has escalated into military action. Thailand's Air Force, using an F-16 fighter jet, bombed targets within Cambodia, a fact confirmed by both nations. On a separate note, Alibaba's Taobao has seen a 60% increase in users in Thailand following its local launch, according to ABC data. Japan, United States. The United States and Japan finalized a trade agreement, avoiding a looming tariff deadline. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Japan's chief trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, played key roles in the negotiations. Estonia. Several Estonian tech entrepreneurs, including Bolt CEO Markus Willig, are investing in Lightyear, a European trading app. Turkey and Britain have entered a preliminary agreement for the sale of Eurofighter Typhoon jets to Turkey, strengthening their defense cooperation. Israel. Despite ongoing conflict, investors are demonstrating confidence in Israel, as reflected by rapid growth in its wartime stock market. South Africa. South Africa's MultiChoice is set to be acquired by Canal, having received the necessary regulatory approvals. Moldova. Pro-Russian factions are gaining strength in Moldova, potentially influencing the outcome of the 25 election. Mauritius. Emirates is expanding its service to Mauritius with an additional flight, as the island nation explores opening its market to more airlines. Poland, Russia. Poland is advising its citizens to leave Russia due to increasing diplomatic tensions between the two countries. Lithuania, Russia. A company based in Lithuania is under investigation by LRT for allegedly facilitating money transfers to Russia. Nigeria, Venezuela. United States. Nigeria alleges that the United States is pressuring African countries to accept deportees from Venezuela. Mexico. Fibranex successfully raised $431 million, marking the largest IPO in Mexico since 2018. Egypt. Sumo Holding is planning to launch its inaugural real estate fund in Egypt, expanding its investment portfolio. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.